Hi, my name is Dr. Todd Cunningham. I'm a school and clinical child psychologist in Ontario and one of the psychologists at the Bright Light Psychology Clinic.
And I'm Robin Batcher. I'm an educational consultant who works at the Bright Light Psychology Clinic. Today, we're going to talk all about this idea of cognitive load. So let's start off with what is cognitive load?
So, cognitive load is about how much processing our brains can do at any given moment of time. Working memory is the amount of information you can hold and manipulate. Working memory creates this kind of desk within our brains that sits there. It kind of creates a limit of how much processing that can go on. And then on this desk of working memory, there are three different loads that emerge. The first load is called germane load, and that's the actual processing that's taking place. The second load is intrinsic load, that's holding on to ideas and knowledge. And the third one is extrinsic load, the ability to inhibit the environment around me to stay focused on what I'm supposed to be able to do. So if the teacher said, what's 5 plus 5 equal? Well, 5 plus 5, that falls into the intrinsic load. I'm holding on to that question. To be able to then actually work it out, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, that becomes germane load as I'm actually doing the processing behind it. And then extrinsic load is, not being distracted by the bird sitting outside my window right now and staying focused on those pieces. Um, so when I was learning how to drive a car, I remember reading the manual over and over and over again, trying to understand how to drive a vehicle. I remember getting behind the car for the first time, putting my hand on like 11 o'clock and 2 o'clock. It was standard, so I had the stick here. I remember having to think about, okay, I have to get the right pressure on the clutch to the gas to be able to get this going. I had so much intrinsic load going on as I tried to then add a lot of germane load as I very clumsily tried to get the car going, that in fact I wasn't paying attention to the intrinsic environment at all, and I almost put the car into the garage door. Looking at my dad's there to yell at me. So suddenly, what happens though is as I practice driving a car over and over and over again, I get more and more proficient. So initially, with that intrinsic load, it starts to turn into that germane load. That germane load, then as I practice a skill over and over again, takes up less and less and less and less processing to the point now I can drive down the highway. I can be changing lanes as I'm talking to the kids in the back seat and changing radio stations. My ability to actually drive is such a small amount of germane load that allows me to pay attention to other things. So cognitive load is a really important concept when it comes to education. Whenever we're teaching someone something new, the amount of germane load is going to be so great on them that it's going to be hard for them to be able to do anything else. So let's take a new reader, a grade 1 student who's just learning the language to symbolic associations, matching those letters to their sounds, being able to learn how to blend those sounds together. So when they go to start to read a text for the first time, they sound very choppy because the germane load of trying to recognize and figure out each individual load is so great in their brains that by the time they get to the end of a sentence and you ask them a question about it, they don't have a clue what they just read because they couldn't actually hold that intrinsic information in mind because the germane process going on was so great. But as they practice reading, as they start moving through the decoding stage into the word recognition stage and to find the reading fluency stage, what we see beginning to really emerge in grade 3 and grade 4, then that germane load keeps decreasing, 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 decreasing to the point where it's now a very automatic task. And so therefore, when I go to read now, I can put all of my cognitive load into understanding, thinking about what I have to do. So cognitive load is a key thing that we need to keep into consideration. If a child is given something that is too hard, that their germane load creates too much germane load onto them, then we're unable to be able to get them to learn. So we have to be able to keep that in consideration. So if I have a child who has a reading challenge in grade 5 and I give them a passage that they have to read and then I expect them to then talk about it with a friend, well, the germane load of reading is going to be so great that they're not going to get the information that they're going to do, and so therefore they can't participate in the activity that I want. So teachers have to be, and parents have to be very aware of, are the foundation skills that are required for the task that I'm about to do, are they automatic? Are they developed enough that the germane load is so low that it allows them to do the higher order tasks? Or do I need to go back and either strengthen that underlying skill, strengthen their ability to read, or circumvent that reading weakness, reading out loud to them, having a computer read out loud to them, so that they can be able to engage in the higher order activity that I want them to do?
Yeah, and you touched on students who are struggling with reading. So how is cognitive load impacted by things like attention issues or learning issues?
Well, attention issues is where we're having a harder time with that extrinsic load. So it's harder for some students, like ADHD, have a harder time trying to um, buffer out the outside world. They get distracted by it. Or students who are very anxious or depressed, they might have a lot of worried thoughts. So that's kind of running in the system, taking up a lot of load, adding a lot of load onto them. Or a student who might have difficulties regulating, might have a hard time with the noise in the room. I know my one of my daughters said, she found the classroom very noisy and had to put on some headphones to be able to buffer out that extrinsic load coming on because she couldn't focus in on her work. So the environment can be very disruptive to students. One of the big disruptions in the classroom environment is actually the reverberation of our voices. So when I talk, my voice comes out of my mouth, it bounces off the walls until it kind of gets absorbed by the surroundings. And every time it bounces, my brain has to actually not process that voice, the echo of my voice, as I continue to focus in on what the main conversation is. And in some classrooms, that echo is so great that the revibrate is so high that that's actually causing stress on everybody in the classroom, as they're constantly having to suppress that echo so that they can stay attentive to the students who are talking.
Thank you so much. A lot of information for parents, but also I think for teachers and educators to keep in mind for all of their students, but also for those who are struggling. So thank you.
You're welcome.